This is my biofuel project, and the biofuel that I chose to represent was ethanol. So, what exactly is ethanol? Ethanol is a renewable resource that comes mainly from corn and other plant materials. This so-called plant material is known as biomass. Um, Ethanol is mainly used as a car fuel, which is blended with gasoline. How is ethanol grown and made? Firstly, crops, again, like I said before, mainly corn, are grown and then they are collected. Then we add yeast to ferment the crops, and you should already know what fermentation is through our biology class. The fermentation produces said ethanol, and carbon dioxide is made as a byproduct as well. The next step is that it is then distilled. And then this distilled ethanol is blended and mixed with gasoline to use as car fuel. And another fact is that more than 98% of our gasoline sold has and is blended with ethanol. As far as our development status here, we ethanol is highly used. It is very common. Like we said, it comes from biomass, which comes from the agriculture, which is a very common source. Like we said in the last slide, more than 98% of the gasoline in the US contains some sort of ethanol, whether it has a lot or less of it. Even to this day, they are making more types of these ethanol mixes. Some examples are E10 and E15. The main difference is just how much ethanol and how much gasoline and other uh, chemicals are used in it. The effect that ethanol has on our carbon footprint shows that it is significantly better than that of gasoline. It lowers the greenhouse gas emissions by about 40 to 50%. Although this statistic doesn't really include the cost of like the transportation and how the biomass is collected or how they're even grown. But it's still such a high number that we can conclude no matter what that this has a better carbon footprint than that of gasoline. But it does heavily rely on agriculture, so it does depend on something else. The economic effects of ethanol, from what I could tell from the rubric and from what I discussed with other people, is that the rubric wanted us to actually tell you what it does for the economy and jobs, not just a bunch of buzzwords, graphs, and numbers. We established that ethanol is heavily dependent on agriculture, which means that the more gas we want and need, there is a higher demand in mostly corn and other crops. This also means that there's a support and demand of jobs in the agriculture process and the biorefinery process, which is what this graph does show. It's not a good picture, but it shows that you start with your crops and then your biomass and then biorefinery and then your ethanol use. And this shows that how where the carbon dioxide is going in the cycle. It does also increase the demand of jobs in it. Um, There was no outside source used for this. This was just me using logic here because I assumed the rubric didn't just want a bunch of buzzwords. From what I researched, though, it was in like the 50 billions, from what I believe, in our GDP. The public communication efforts for ethanol is that this is uh this is a source of bio biofuel that is much better than gasoline. So there are competitive grants to promote education of the government of the benefits of ethanol consumption. Um, People that are eligible for these applications are also nonprofit. Like the applications are nonprofit, not exactly that the companies are nonprofit. This promotes the public to use and research more ethanol mixes and blends. From everything I said before, we know that ethanol shows as a future energy resource that will help the earth on its carbon dioxide, and it is way more sustainable than other sources of biofuel. However, this is very heavily limited by the amount of land and money that we are given. So if we were given unlimited funds, I would recommend that we don't we don't build new buildings and neighborhoods and shopping centers and infrastructure, that we should use it purely based on agriculture. And we should also fund the research of newer ethanol blending and mixing, even though it's still being researched. I think it should be researched a bit more than it is now. And assuming that everyone can agree, like everyone globally, there should be global cooperation. And here are my resources. A lot of these were .gov, so they're pretty trustworthy.